Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 259 of Show Viewers. Today we'll be going over The Fires of Heaven, the fifth book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. So this book is 888 pages of very dense text, as you can see. So this is a very simple breakdown of, like, you most certainly need to read this book yourself if you want the full experience. I mean, I know it's the fifth book in the Wheel of Time series, but, like, it's genuinely a great book, especially like fantasy wise for the genre. But yeah, so there are three main storylines, technically a fourth side one as well, so I guess I'll kind of discuss them. So the first storyline follows Min, Sion, and it's Sion Sanche, the previous Amerlin seat, and Leanne. So we see as they are getting tried for the burning of the little, like, area that Logain did, because they are alongside Logain as well. And we see they're getting tried by Gareth Bryan, or whatever his name is, and Gareth ultimately ends up allowing them off for their crimes, and it's like, okay, if you make an oath to me and will work for me, then I will let you off. So they end up doing this, then get caught up in some things, and are able to successfully run away, but Gareth ends up following after them. And we just kind of see is we don't get a lot on this story. We do see as they run away, they do end up eventually running in with some other Aes Sedai. And they also run back in with Gareth. Gareth catches up to them. However, the other Aes Sedai talking, they're like, yo, we could use your help to fight Eladia, who's the new Amerlin seat. And he ultimately ends up joining his forces to theirs. So they are preparing a little bit of a counterinsurgency against the Amerlin seat and the tower, or the White Tower. So that is kind of all there really is for that storyline. I know that was a very brief, like, detailing. However, like, nothing crazy happens with that until, like, way later on in the book. So then I guess I'll go over the next major storyline, which is Nynaeve, Elaine, and Tom and Juilin, or it's Juilin. So I'm going to say Juilin, or like Juilin. Yeah, Juilin. So we see at the beginning of the story, they end up leaving, crap. Why am I forgetting the name? Oh no. Oh crap. What is it? Hold up, I gotta look here. Crap. What is not no, yeah, Tenchiko. So they're leaving Tenchiko, and they're continuing on their search for the Black Aja. So we see as they're leaving, they actually run into some Shan-Chan very early on there, have a brief interaction with them. We do see that they end up acquiring an Adam, which is the little collar thing that goes around the Domain and Soldam to control kind of there. Well, I believe it's the Domain. I forget the specific term, but I believe the Domain is the one that's controlled. So they end up getting an Adam, and we see as they go on a kind of a group of misadventures. We see as they first run into a woman because they noticed that she had a signal up that was a signal of the yellow Aja that Nynaeve knew. So they ultimately go up in there, get to yapping with her, and she was, in fact, with the tower. She ends up drugging them and lulling them to sleep, and eventually had planned to send them back to the tower where Eladia was searching for them. However, they are able to break free of this and ultimately capture both of them in turn, because Tom and Juilin and all that, they end up coming back, and they were also just kind of able to help themselves as well. So we see as this happens, and they ultimately end up getting the information that the Amerlin has fallen, and that Eladia is the new Amerlin seat, which is then, reconned to Egwene through the Dreamscape. I'm not going to say the whole name every single time, but the Dreamscape land where they can go in through the ter'angreal and all that. So this is relayed to Egwene and Moiraine, and who are in the Waste at the moment. And so we then see as they kind of progress along, they keep going, and they ultimately have to join a menagerie because they did kind of steal from Luca, who was the leader of the menagerie. So they end up joining this menagerie, or kind of traveling circus, and they spend a lot of time in this circus. Like, it is honestly a pretty boring part of the story because they're kind of just going around doing their thing and going into the Dreamscape pretty frequently. We do see as some stuff plays out. We see as they end up going into the Dreamscape with the ter'angreal, and we also see as Elaine, through her studies of the ter'angreal and of assorted parts of the power, and Saidar, which is the woman's side of the power, that she now believes that she can possibly create a ter'angreal, possibly forge them, unlike anyone in, like, the current time with the Aes Sedai and all of that. So, see this, and then the main thing that happens in the Dreamscape here, we see as Egwene and Nynaeve continue to meet up pretty frequently, but Egwene is obviously kind of, well, not obviously, but honestly kind of, like, antagonistic towards Nynaeve, But we do see as Nynaeve is also trying to look up or find the Black Aja and Moghedien, or I don't even really know how to say your name. It's Moghedien. I'm gonna say Moghedien. But we see this, and we also see as Nynaeve continues to develop a relationship with Birgit, or yeah, I'm saying Birgit, or Birgit. But yeah, so we see this happen, and then ultimately we see as Nynaeve gets too close to Moghedien at one point, and she is captured. But ultimately, Birgit ends up saving her with shooting an arrow at Moghedien, and this releases Nynaeve. But Moghedien is able to send a, I guess, plume of the power back at Birgit, and we see she's actually kicked out of the dreamscape and now has a physical body. So, kind of see all of this, and they just kind of start to develop their relationship with Birgit in the physical world. We see she has to join the menagerie and everything, and they just kind of continue to keep traveling. Now, we also see as this, after this happens, we see as they continue to search for Moghedien, but trying to stay away as well, because Moghedien did inflict some pretty crazy pain on Nynaeve. And they progress, continue on their way. They ultimately end up running into some Shenarians who essentially start to act as their bodyguard, like a mass of warders, and they end up helping her along their way through the assistance also of Galad and Gwaine, who have joined the White Cloaks. They are able to get passage, because one of the big things they were doing throughout this entire side arc is looking for a boat so they can continue down their trip in search of the Black Aja. And while ultimately Galad and Gwaine end up helping them with this, they end up getting passage, and they start heading to their next destination, which they ultimately end up landing in this place called Boanada or something like that, and then they head on to Salidar, where Min and all of them are. So we see as these two groups reunite. We see also as Elaine and Min have a discussion about Rand, and about how Min saw that Rand would have 3 lovers, but she didn't know who the third one was, because she knew that she was one and that Elaine was one. And we see here as Nynaeve and Elaine are kind of reintegrated into Aes Sedai society and continue their training as accepted. And everything kind of just plays out from here. Now, I will focus on Rand's story. Rand's story is most certainly the most interesting out of this entire book, and it's really good because we see, at first, Rand is just kind of living in the waste after having witnessed the Shido schism and Culloden and all those schism off from the main Ale. So, with this, we see as Rand is still kind of in the area of Ruhadine or whatever you... Ruhadine? Crap, what is the name of this place? I'm screwing up all the names, but they're so hard to figure out how to pronounce because you're not hearing them. And also, they're just kind of spelled... Crap, where is it at? Shogul. Looking at the beautiful map here. I love books that come from maps. They're so cool. Okay. Ruhadine, yeah. So, they're still around the Ruhadine area, and we see as they are actually attacked by some Darkhounds, which ultimately Rand ends up learning that he has this new ability with Balefire. And Balefire, how it works, it essentially obliterates anything that it comes in contact with, but it also removes it from the pattern. So it never was a part of the pattern, nor will it ever continue to be a part of the pattern. So it's just gone. It will never be reborn, essentially. So, with this, we see that Rand has acquired this new power with his learning from Asmodean, or Jason Natel. And we see as he continues to train with Asmodean, he starts to push Moiraine away too, because he realizes that Moiraine was kind of a spy and wants to keep her away. So Moiraine is kind of pushed to the side. And we see as Aviendha is started to put more and more into his life, though she is doing it begrudgingly at first. And she continues to do it begrudgingly until a certain event in the story. And we also see as the Wise Ones are trying to get themselves into Rand's life, figure things out. They're trying to get Aviendha to sleep with Rand, but neither of them really want this, because Aviendha is very prickly towards Rand, and also she realizes that Elaine is the one for Rand, when she's promised Elaine that she would defend Rand. So, kind of see this happens. We then also see as Rand starts to pursue the Shido and Culloden, and they kind of start to progress and go along. We also see as Mat starts to develop a relationship with this Ale by the name of Melindra, and they kind of have their own thing going. It's going pretty steady throughout the entirety of this book, essentially. And so they start progressing. Ultimately, they end up running up on this spot where the Shido completely obliterated this town in the waste, and they were hung up everyone, people were rotten and stuff like that. And we see as Rand comes into this town and has to deal with all of this. Also, some Trollocs end up coming in, and things kind of start to go pretty heavily downhill, but ultimately Rand, they're able, not really pretty heavily downhill, they just kind of have a bit of a struggle, and Rand is ultimately kind of taken off guard at one point And so is Avienda. And in this point, Avienda ends up running away and a portal ends up opening. Now, this portal has to do with this new type of transportation that Rand has learned about from Asmodean, that how he can, like, move from places quickly. Kind of like, what's the best way to explain it? Almost kind of like instant transmission. Not really, it's not that instant of teleportation like from Dragon Ball, but I guess kind of like Naoya Zenin's ability, kind of just moving very fast through an area, kind of like a spectral way. And Rand doesn't know where this came from, but he ends up going into it after Avienda, and they end up in this snowy area. And here, Avienda ends up getting like pretty cold and like frozen almost. Rand has to go save her and all that. They actually end up seeing some Sanchan who were in this area for some reason, and they then end up getting to a cabin in the area where ultimately Rand ends up having to warn Avienda. Avienda wakes up. They have a canoodling moment, as it is put in terms in the book. And they are now not necessarily a couple, but obviously in some type of relationship. So they are able to figure out how to make their way back, and now we see as they pursue Couladin as he goes to Karheim to take the city. Couladin is planning on taking the city because he's the real Karn of the Dragon Reborn. So we see his Rand ends up following after, and there's not too much that happens in this little progression area. We just kind of see as more stuff plays out and get some other background stuff. Now, we then see Rand ultimately ends up getting to Karheim, and at Karheim we see that Couladin is already fighting for Karheim and is doing pretty good in his attempts. However, Rand is now here to fight the other Ale. So see, they're saying Rand starts fighting against Karheim with his magic. However, we also see that Samel, or, oh my gosh, is his name? It's not Samuel. It's like Samel. I swear it's Samel. I gotta look at the damn glossary. Where's the glossary at? Where is the glossary? Okay, here we are. Samel, where are you at? Chico, why is he not in here? Hold up. Secrets of Truth? Golly, I'm not gonna be able to find. Oh, let's see if Forsaken. Let's see if Forsaken's in here. Gotta skim this glossary a little bit more. Forsaken. Where is he at? Okay, there's pronunciation. There's actually phonetical pronunciation in here. I did not know that. Shamael. That's how his name's pronounced. I would not have guessed. I would have guessed Samael. But yeah, so Samael, or Shamael, is there, and he's also fighting, sending his power around to combat Rand. But by the time that Karheim is taken by Rand, ultimately, the Samael, whatever his name is gone. So Rand doesn't have to worry about fighting him at Karheim. And we also see that in this time that Mat is planning on leaving. Before the battle, he tells Rand, "Yo, I'm leaving. I'm not built for this." And so he plans on leaving. Now, as he's leaving, he ends up running into a bit of conflict with the actual battle. And he ends up, after that, establishing what he calls the Red Hand. And this was based off of a Mentorin, old, like, legendary group. And he did this by accident. But in his accidental formation of a very well-formed, essentially, battle group, or little platoon, he actually ends up getting to the major part of the battle and kills Couladin. Couladin is dead because of Mat's actions. So that's pretty cool. And then, like I said, ultimately Rand doesn't end up taking Karheim, where we see as he goes in, sets himself up on the Sun Throne and all of that. And here we see as everyone comes, pledges fealty to him, and he has this really cool scene where he sits upon the throne and all that. It's just super cool and everything. So then after this, we see our next thing, which I will now discuss in the, I don't know if I want to discuss Morgase, because Morgase has a story, the Queen of Camelin. And so kind of what her thing is Gabriel, who is Raven, one of the Forsaken, is trying to, like, has been, like, seducing the people of Camelin, the noble women and all that. And Morgase ultimately comes to reason here. She's like, "Oh, I'm kind of being manipulated, and he's trying to take my place." So she ends up running away, and everyone starts presuming that she's dead. Well, Rand ends up getting knowledge of this in Karheim. He believes that Morgase is dead, and obviously Morgase being the mother of the woman who he loves dearly, Elaine, he's like, "I'm gonna go kill Raven." So he prepares to go and slaughter Raven. And we see, as he's all preparing and all that, we also see as the Maidens of the Spear end up leaving him because they weren't taken into battle by him, and they're disgraced by this. And so we see then as some odd events start to play out. We see as Mat does stay around and everything, and ultimately, we've been following Kadere throughout this entire story. We know he's a dark friend, but obviously Rand and them don't know he's a dark friend. And we get to see the consequences of his actions, of not properly fulfilling what Lanfear wanted to do. Lanfear ends up finding him, turning him essentially into a blood bubble with no skin, and ends up coming to the area where like Moiraine, Rand, and everyone is, and just starts to wreak havoc. She wants Lewys Therin. She wants Rand to be hers. So we see everything starts going down. It goes crazy style. Moiraine is beat pretty easily. So is Lan. We also see as Rand struggles a lot. Egwene is badly hurt from all of this, and we ultimately then see as Rand is left to solely fight Lanfear with a Tur-Angril. One of the Forsaken with a Tur-Angril, and Rand only with an Angril and his own abilities. So he starts struggling very badly, but, hold on, did that happen first? Oh, crap. No, damn, okay, I forgot to mention something. So, directly after the battle, we see as, Mat ends up meeting up with Melindra. They're kind of talking and all of that, and ultimately, Melindra ends up turning on Mat and attempting to kill him. So instinctively, Mat ends up turning, throws a knife right into her chest, and kills her. So this obviously had a great impact on Mat. Mat had never killed a woman before, so this hurt him a lot. So he ends up going, searching her belongings, which he finds an Illianer blade. And we know Samael is known for ruling Illian. So then, after that, he ends up going to Rand and telling this and everything. Obviously, Rand is very sad for Mat because Mat had to kill a woman. Now, Rand, with fighting Lanfear, is having the same conflict. He cannot fight a woman. He sees that if he fights her, then he will be, I guess, falling to the blight. Not the blight, but the tarnish, the taint. But also, if he saves her, then he might be falling to Lewys Therin. So he doesn't really know what to do. He has conflict within himself. And ultimately, he can't kill her. He does not have the, gumption to do it. So here we see as she starts to overpower him. However, Moiraine ends up waking up from a brief moment of unconsciousness and realizes this is what I have to do. She ends up finding Lanfear and using a Tur-Angril to essentially blow themselves up, but implode, because they both kind of disappear in a portal-esque thing. But it's declared that they are both dead. And Moiraine declares that she is dead because we see after Rand gets done with this, he is very dejected. He ends up finding a letter from Moiraine. Moiraine kind of explains everything, talks to him about all the stuff that's happened, and reveals that she is in fact dead and that she went out with Lanfear. Now, also speaking of a Lan name, we see as Lan ends up speaking with Rand. He doesn't really blame him for anything. He's just like, yeah, I gotta go, since Moiraine did kind of bind me to going to another Aes Sedai, who I must now find. And he says, also tell Nynaeve that if you see her, that I've had to move on. So we now see as Rand is once again preparing to fight Raven. And we then see as he ends up essentially using his teleportation-esque abilities to transport a group, I believe, of 6,000 warriors to Camelin, where he is now there as well. And they get there, they start finding Trollocs, Mydrals, and stuff like that, and it does not go well at first at all. We presume we know Asmodean dies. Asmodean gets blasted with something. I believe it's presumed to have been Bellfire. Yeah, I think it was Bellfire. And he gets shot and it just evaporates. It says that nothing was left besides his instrument case. And then Rand also ends up feeling as if, I don't know if it's we feel or see, but believes that Mat and Aviendha have been killed as well. So he gets enraged. And after this, we see as they mention about how he just suddenly disappeared. He actually ended up going to the Dreamscape, to where he is now prepared to fight Raven, because Raven is in fact in the Dreamscape. So we also see that during this time, Nynaeve learns of everything that's going on, and she prepares to go to the Dreamscape to help Rand. What she does, she ends up getting to Camelin and prepares. Well, actually, she doesn't do this first. What she does first is she ends up finding Moghedien in here, and is able to, after a brief confrontation where it looked like she would lose, she was able to actually get the Adam around Moghedien's neck and use her power now, which is kind of super cool to have a Forsaken on a leash. And so we see this, and then she ends up heading to Camelin after learning about everything that's going on. Here we see she kind of searches around the castle for Raven or Rand, and Rand is actually the first one to get to Raven. We see he has a bit of trouble getting through. He's hit with this, almost getting drowned at one point because Raven filled this area with water, but he does in fact end up finding Raven. And so once he finds Raven, it ain't nothing. Rand blasts him with a pillar, like a genuine pillar of balefire, and Raven is obliterated. So this wasn't necessarily Rand found him. I know I said Rand found him, but he actually like blasted it through like the floor or something like that. I don't know exactly where his positioning was. I know he wasn't face to face with Raven because Nynaeve did find Raven, and Moghedien was freaking out throughout all this because she had, Nynaeve had used their power to fill the room with fire and all of that. But because of this channeling, now Rand knew where they were and was able to blast Raven with the balefire. So he sees he's absolutely obliterated. He speaks with Nynaeve briefly, kind of tells her what Landon wanted to say and all of that, and they kind of talk for a moment. Then we see as Rand is once again taken out of the dreamscape, where he sees that, when he goes looking around, he sees that his friends and Aviendha, his lover, are not dead. Asmodean is in fact alive somehow, and also Mat and Aviendha are safe. So we kind of see all this play out. They start to reunite and everything. And as the story starts to grow to a bit of a conclusion, we see as like everything, like I said, oh crap, I don't want to say everything how it wraps up. I'm thinking of a specific scene. Crap. But yeah, okay, we see all that. We see Aviendha. And then, yeah, okay. So, Asmodean, we get a brief dialogue of Asmodean. He's talking, and he like doesn't really know how he lived, because he in fact did die. And he can no longer feel immortal. He is not immortal anymore. He can feel this. And he also can still feel the shield released by Lanfear, but he can still wield a little bit. We actually see as he uses balefire on one of the Trollocs or Myrddraal or something like that. But he's able to do this, and he now knows that he can die at some point. And then suddenly, I should read it to you because it was kind of out of nowhere. So where was it at? Eladia. Okay, here's where Morgase is talking. I wanted to read it to you because it is kind of odd. So here's the final lines of Asmodean. He pulled open a small door, intending to find his way to the pantry. There should be some decent wine. One step, and he stopped. The blood draining from his face. You know, the word still hung in the air when death took him. So someone killed Asmodean. I don't know who it was, but someone has killed Asmodean, and we have no clue who it is. And then after that, we get a telling of what Morgase has done. We in fact see that Morgase isn't dead, as I honestly kind of presumed throughout, because then there's just been some new news. Yeah, Morgase died. I was kind of concerned why we didn't get a detail of it, but Morgase is in fact not dead. It's just presumed. And we see Morgase ultimately ends up laying out everything and mentions about how she's building an army still, and we kind of just see her, I guess, motivation towards it. She mentioned about how no one will sit on her throne besides her, and this is kind of contradictory to what Rand set up after having taken Camelin, because everyone was kind of talking when we see as someone from, I believe it was it was some Siladia, I think that was the land, and we see as Queen Tenobia had sent a messenger to kind of speak with him and everything, make some intercession with the Dragon Reborn, and that's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what I was reading. So he's here, does this, and he's like, okay, I have an army of 10,000 men looking to capture a man who can channel. But Rand's like, I can channel, so I'm not going to end up killing all these men who can channel. I'm going to need them for the final battle, the Tarmangaiden. So he's like, I will train them. If any man can channel and he wants to come, I will train him because I need the power. And he's like, they won't be alive long enough to get tainted, so why not train them? So we see this, and ultimately the messenger's like, okay, well, I will go back to the queen for as quickly as I can, but for like the time being, my forces are at your disposal. And also, he mentions about how, well, the dude actually asks if Rand will sit on the throne in Camelin. He's like, no, Elaine is the rightful heir, and she will reign here. So we might see a bit of like a mother-daughter civil war. I don't know. Like, it will be very odd because, like, we might get to see as Elaine fights Morgase for the throne, but I believe if Morgase comes back, then Elaine will just kind of let her have the throne. But yeah, that's all there was for the Fires of Heaven. Now, this book, in regards to the other Wheel of Time books, I would say it is probably my second favorite. This book was phenomenal, and The Dragon Reborn is my favorite. Dragon Reborn is number 1, this is number 2, and number 3 would be Great Hunt, The Great Hunt. And then 1 would probably be Eye of the World, and then 4 would probably be Eye of the World, and 5 would be The Shadow Rising. I don't get how people like The Shadow Rising. That book was made, in my opinion. I did not like that book at all. It just wasn't as good as the other prior 3, honestly. So I don't get how so many people like this, because especially when The Fires of Heaven follows The Shadow Rising, like, this is far better than The Shadow Rising. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion on The Wheel of Time. I know it's not a very popular opinion, but I do genuinely love this book, and it didn't take me long to read. I think I enjoyed it more because it didn't take me long to read, because I actually set up a reading schedule to where I'd read it in 10 days, which I usually do with most of my books, kind of just cut them, make them like last. But when it comes to like Wheel of Time books, I occasionally stretch them out more. And like that is not the strat, because reading it in like a quick amount of time made it super enjoyable. But yeah, like I said, that's all it really was for The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan, and that's all I really have for episode 259 of Shelf Review. So thank you very much for watching.